Well, good evening, everybody, on a wild and crazy night. It is March 17th, 2020, and this is session 7 of Lion Chasers. If your dream doesn't scare you, it's not big enough. That's the way I would normally open this as Duke Clark, running this life coaching group. But today we're going to do a little something different. And again, like I did on Sunday, I told you I've got a video camera set up, my sound computer set up, all kinds of crazy things stashed up here because I want to continue to do something in this situation that we're in our country. I talked to people from, I emailed some people in Massachusetts and Virginia and North Carolina and Colorado, and talked to some people on the phone, and things are changing so rapidly and so quickly that I want to be able to lend a voice of hope and confidence and trust and love to the situation so it can, so those vibrations can go out and combat any fear or doubt or worry that might be going on. It is, like I said, an unusual situation with this virus in our country and so many things closing down. They might even close the school for the rest of the year, which means I'm out of a job because if I don't show up and teach, I don't get paid. But it's more reason to just talk about what God can do for us and what God has done for us and will continue to do for us. So it's a new and wonderful time to be alive and seeing new and wonderful opportunities to help and to come together as a country, as a people, and just support each other any way and every way we can. And my thought for tonight and the next 2 nights, if I'm going to be posting this to the mailing list and also on my YouTube channel, which is just Duke Clark at YouTube, and on my Facebook page, so that we can get these things out and that we can have information out there in a positive vein. And my thought was to go into the Psalm 23 that I have, because to me that's one of the very loving, powerful Psalms. I did Psalm 91 the other night, and that, of course, is fabulous and love that one. And the Psalm 23 is just, it's so innocent and so pure and so rich in all the things that it has to offer. And I did this work probably 15 years ago, and it's just as relevant today as it was back then. And I have it printed out, and I want to kind of read and talk through. I don't want to shake this table too much because then the picture will jar, but it's all good. One thing I noticed, I do need to trim up my beard a little bit. I'm getting a little shaggy here. But anyway, I digress. Psalm 23 only has 6 verses, and they are 6 wonderful verses, and I'm going to expand on them tonight as much as I can and elaborate as according to what the expanded Hebrew is in these verses and the words that God uses to explain his heart and his connection with his people. One of the things that I was schooled in years ago is to, when you're reading the Bible, is to look at to whom is it addressed? You know, who are you talking to? Are you talking to Jews, Gentiles, Old Testament, New Testament, born again, Church of God people? You know, whose group are you talking to? And there are some places like Psalm 23 that is a universal address. It's not written in a time or a space for anything. It's for us to universally enjoy and be a part of. And so that's kind of the way that I've started here. Most people might not even care about that or think about it, but it's important to me because it has meaning, and it is one of those eternal sections of Scripture that can always be relevant. Now, to just go through the whole thing, and I'm sure most of you probably heard it or read it or seen it. Psalm 23, 1 through 6, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest the table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Beautiful, simple scripture, and if you want to really get the purity and the joy of it, at least from my perspective, I used to have my young children read this sometimes in meetings that we would have, and to just hear the innocence of a young voice reading that 23rd Psalm is fabulous, I think. I mean, because it does have such an innocent, pure, and wonderful presentation. But what I did was, and what I will do now, I will break this down into 2 verses tonight, and then 2 verses tomorrow night, Wednesday, and then 2 verses, the last 2 on Thursday. Again, just to give us something to focus on, something to hold our hearts and minds to, and to appreciate on a broader scale than a lot of the things that are being talked about right now. So the first verse, verse 23, verse 1, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Perhaps the first thing that stands out in this verse is the analogy of God being the shepherd. For us today, in Christianity today, people call God their Father. You know, it's God the Father, and it's not in the vein of a shepherd. And our Heavenly Father certainly seems much bigger, much richer, much fuller than the capacity of a shepherd. And it's much more intimate than having an experience with a father than as you would think about a shepherd. But God does this for a very cool reason, I think. Because this word shepherd means one who feeds. Not only feeds, but nurtures and cares for and protects the flock. So it's written from a very specific point of view, trying to communicate the heart of this specific care and nurturing that God is doing. In Isaiah chapter 40, verse 11, it says, He shall feed his flock like a shepherd. He shall gather the lambs with his arms and carry them in his bosom, and shall gently lead those that are with young. So again, he's several times throughout the scriptures, and I'm going to read several of them here, God describes the nature of a shepherd and what he does in his tenderness and his care for his sheep. In Jeremiah 23, verse 4, And I will set up shepherds over them, which shall feed them, and they shall fear no more, nor be dismayed, neither shall they be lacking, saith the Lord. So again, God is setting up, he set up shepherds in the Old Testament to take care of them in this way, which showed the nature of the shepherd and how he connected with the people. And then in Psalm 23, referring to himself as the shepherd. Jeremiah 31:10, Hear the word of the Lord, O ye nations, and declare it in all the isles afar off, and say, He that scattereth Israel will gather them, and keep him as a shepherd doth his flock. Again, no matter what happens, no matter what stress or turmoil comes about, the shepherd is there to pull them in, to collect them, to gather them, to take care of them. In the Gospel of John, chapter 10, Jesus Christ gave us a great illustration of the dedication of a shepherd and how he relates to his sheep. He uses this illustration to show how he cared and provided for those to whom he would lay down his life for. John 10, verse 1, Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that entereth not by the door into the sheepfold, but climbeth up some other way, the same is a thief and a robber. But he that entereth in by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the porter openeth, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calleth his own sheep by name, and leadeth them out. And when he putteth forth his own sheep, he goeth before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. A stranger will they not follow, but will flee from him, for they know not the voice of strangers. This parable Jesus spoke unto them, but they understood not what things they were which he spoke unto them. Then said Jesus unto them, Verily, verily, I say unto you, I am the door of the sheep. All that came before me are thieves and robbers, but sheep did not hear them. I am the door. If by me, if any man enter in, he shall be saved, and shall go in and out and find pasture. So again, he's telling them how he can provide for them, how he can take care of them. In verse 10, the thief cometh not but for to steal and to kill and to destroy. I am come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. I am a good shepherd. A good shepherd giveth his life for his sheep. But he that is an hireling and not the shepherd, whose own sheep are not, seeth the wolf coming, and leaveth the sheep, and fleeth. And the wolf catcheth them, and scattereth the sheep. The hireling fleeth, because he is a hireling, and careth not for the sheep. I am the good shepherd, and I know my sheep, and I am known of mine. Again, this is his analogy and his communication, as was familiar in that culture. They all knew this about the shepherd. And for Jesus to talk about him being the good shepherd and laying down his life for the sheep, that's what everybody understood. Way back in Psalm 23, when God talked about the Lord, that he was the Lord and that he was the shepherd unto his people, that was a connection that they could make with him. It goes on to say in the next part of the verse, it says, I shall not want. Okay? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Establishing and I'm going to get into some more of that a little later, but the strength and the connectedness of the shepherd, he goes on to say, I shall not want. Because the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. So this word want means to diminish, to cut short, to be wanting, to suffer need. Because God is our shepherd, he is saying to us that we shall not want, shall not diminish, shall not be cut off, shall not fall short, shall not be wanting, and shall not suffer need. I mean, that's a pretty expanded explanation of that I shall not want, but I'll show you where I get that here in a second. And this is an important thing to remember at this time, because I just read on a news flash recently, before we started the class here, that more people have applied for unemployment insurance in the last 2 days than happened in the Great Depression. I mean, just a flood of panic, of people not sure how they're going to make it, not sure where this care is going to come from. And God is saying, look, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He is going to be able to care for us. Now, of course, the disconnected, unconnected mind will say, how is that going to happen? How is that going to be possible? How is it going to take place? The first thing we have to do is understand what it means, and then walk in that trust and reliance on him, and then wait to see things unfold. Okay? It's not a matter of absolutely having to know how right now. We walk in the truth of what God has promised us. So again, looking at the second part, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, looking at what that whole concept means, think about all the different things and look at the concept that God is trying to get across. He's trying to say you will never be on the spot. You will never run out. You will never fall short. You'll never fail. You'll never be wanting or suffer need. And you know, again, I was talking to some friend of mine today who said, you know, this generation has never ever known, they've never gone into a grocery store and seen an empty shelf. And that's a shock to them. But just because one shelf is empty doesn't mean that there isn't something in there that could still be a supply for us. The generation, you know, my parents' generation and even my grandparents' generation, when they went to war, World War II, World War I, World War II, a lot of them, things were shut down. Graduations from high school were shut down. People went away and didn't partake in things. They had to get voucher tickets to get sugar, to get flour. You know, some places they were shortages. No sugar, no flour, because it all went to the troops or it went to other things that were needed. Our generation's never experienced this. But that doesn't mean that they were deserted. That doesn't mean God left them because they didn't have flour or sugar or some other commodities at the moment. So again, putting it in perspective, looking to see that God is going to supply what we need. God is going to supply the essentials that provide life for us when we trust and we continue to stay in that focus. When Israel made a mistake in the wilderness because they looked at the circumstances instead of looking at God. When Israel left Egypt and they went out into the wilderness for 40 years, they started looking around them and they started saying, well, where's the food? We don't have any food. Where's the water? This is a desert. We don't have any water. They started looking at their circumstances instead of looking at God, who was there to supply them, who was there to provide for them. They looked at the Egyptian armies. They looked at all the, pouring down on them. They looked at the Red Sea in front of them and said, you brought us out here to die, Moses. You brought us into the wilderness to kill us. They looked at the circumstances. Moses looked at God and said, what do I do? And God said, part the sea. And he did. And they walked over on dry ground. And of course, some people say, well, it was actually just there was a land bridge there, and it was more like a mud puddle than a parting of the sea, and that's really explains how the children of Israel got across the Red Sea. The only problem is in the next verse, when the Egyptians tried to chase Moses and the children of Israel, it says that the seas collapsed on them and killed off the army. So you've either got to say, how does a mud puddle kill off an entire army of the Egyptians, or that there really was a parting of the sea, and it was a great thing. But anyway, I digress. Then they got over there and they said, well, we're in the desert. There's no water. So you brought us out here to die of thirst. And then Moses said, rather than look around, yeah, it's a desert. There's no water. He looked at God. He said, what do I do? And God told him where the water was. And they went and got the water and they were fine. And then they said, well, there's no food out here. And looking at their circumstances. And Moses said, God, what do I do? And he says, pray this prayer, and manna showed up. And you can read the Old Testament in the book of Exodus and find out all the details about the manna and the quail and everything else that was provided. But the point is, the people looked at circumstances and Moses looked at God. And that's what God is trying to tell us in Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. God is trying to tell us that he is going to provide. He is going to take care. I shall not want. Now, the thing about, and I think I said this the other night when I was doing Psalm 91, but the thing about the Lord, when you hear that term, Jehovah, well, there are several terms. Elohim is one, which means God as a creator in relationship to the creation, and that's Elohim. And Jehovah is God in relationship to his people and a connection with his people. So this Lord in Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, is Jehovah, and it's God connected to his people. And then there are extra names attached to Jehovah, which show a specific type of that relationship that God has with his people. And here in Psalm 23, from E.W. Bullinger's index in the back of his Bible, he talks about this word Jehovah being Jehovah Jireh, Jireh. And that's what it means, the Lord which supplies. And the first time this was used was in Genesis chapter 22. That gives the first reference. And it was a time when Abraham had gone up into the mountains to sacrifice his son Isaac. And rather than give Isaac as the sacrifice, God stopped him and provided a ram caught in a bush nearby as the sacrifice. So Abraham declared this phrase, Jehovah Jireh, the Lord that supplies, the Lord the Lord, Jehovah will see and provide. That's the full definition, the full explanation. Jehovah Jireh is the Lord will see and provide. So that was the first illustration of God's explanation of how he will take care of things. And that's the same one that we look at in Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. Jehovah Jireh, the Lord shall supply. The Lord my shepherd, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. I shall not diminish or cut short or fail or be wanting or suffer need. God is there to take care of us. So when you think about that, even those first however many, the Lord is my shepherd. Okay, I shall not want. 9 words. 9 words. God is telling us who he is, what he can do, what he will do, and our situation that we shall not want. So this is the concept of the whole Psalm 23. God being there to provide, God being there to take care of us. Now, the phrase, I shall not want, like I said, is used in other places in Deuteronomy and in, Deuteronomy 8, 1 through 9, if you want to look that up at some point. And it uses the phrase, shall not lack anything, shall not want. And it's also in 1 Kings 17, 1 through 7, where he uses the term, I should read this to you because it's pretty interesting. This is where Elijah is taken into the wilderness and he's hiding from all the persecutors that are behind him, and God puts him by this brook. And he hides him, and he says, it shall be that thou shalt drink of the brook, and I've commanded the ravens to feed thee. So he went and did according to the word of the Lord, and he went and dwelled by the brook Cherith, there in Jordan. The ravens brought him bread and flesh in the morning, and bread and flesh in the evening, and he drank of the brook. And it came to pass after a while that the brook dried up because there was no rain. But so the brook dried up because there was no rain, but God finds an alternative. God finds something else to happen. So again, are we going to look at the senses? The brook dried up. So, is Elijah going to just say, well, the water's gone. What am I going to do? Does he go to God and say, hey, what about this? You said you were going to take care of me, and now the brook's dried up. The evidence looked like that, but, do you think God didn't know that? Do you think God didn't have a plan, have a thought, have an alternative all set up to take care of it? Then he told him to go. He says, okay, I know. I mean, he didn't say just, gosh, I didn't know it was going to dry up. What are we going to do now? I mean, that's not how God operates. So he told him to go to this woman who was gathering sticks to cook her last meal. And make bread for her and her child, and then die in 1 Kings 17. So he goes to her and he says, and so here's this prophet shows up and he says, hey, I'm here and I'm a representative of God, and how about could you give me something to eat? And she says, I'm making my last meal right now for me and my son. And Elijah says to her, look, fear not, Go in and make a little cake for me and for thy son. For thus saith the Lord of Israel, the barrel of meal shall not waste, neither shall the cruse of oil fail until the day that the Lord sendeth rain upon the earth. He says, you go ahead and make that cake, and we'll have dinner together. And God will see to it that that oil that you bake the bread with and that the meal that you make the bread with will not waste. So the phrase shall not fail is the same phrase that's used in Psalm 23. I shall not want. It shall not fail. I shall not want. God's blessing was going to be on them, and he was going to take care of them. So when you look at this, this concept of what God is saying in just those first 9 words, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He's trying to communicate to us the depth of how he is going to take care of us. Now, here's a problem I had. Okay, for years, I couldn't understand why God would use the phrase, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. That was confusing to me. And what I didn't understand was the use of the negative, not want. Because you see, the mind, the way the mind functions, and I know God knows how the mind functions because he designed the mind. He created the mind. But the mind does not understand not words or don't words. Even though you can intellectually make it out, if you see a sign that says don't run, if you tell a child don't run, what do you think what's the word they're going to focus on? I mean, they're going to see run in their mind. How do you picture a don't? A person running with an X through it. But again, that doesn't really communicate. Okay. So, running is running. Don't run. All you think about is running. Now, you could just as easily say walk. Okay. Now, that's pretty clear. That's pretty straightforward. But the don't is confusing, really, to the mind. And I had trouble figuring out this concept because I know how the mind works. And for years in coaching sports, I tried never to use that once I figured this thing out. Because a lot of coaches will tell their players, don't drop the ball, or don't fumble the ball, or don't miss the shot. Or don't miss the tackle. They'll say all kinds of things, and intellectually, everybody understands what they mean, but the way the mind interprets it is that it's going to be focusing on fumbling the ball, missing the catch, missing the tackle. It's going to be, even though they're going to try hard not to. So I changed all the verbiage when I was coaching with the kids. I changed the verbiage, which is pretty easy. Catch the ball, make the tackle, make the block, handle the ball, complete the pass. Those things are very clear. Those things are very clear, very pronounced, and people can understand them and function in that method. So, again, catch the ball, hold on to the ball, make the play, cover the man. Those are all very clear directives that you can understand and complete. So I could never figure out why. Shall not want. I have to say for a while I didn't like the word not in there, but God wrote the scriptures, so what am I going to say about it? Okay. But then I found something. I came across a Eastern philosophy book that I found the answer, and it was absolutely brilliant. So now the Bible had written from an Eastern, it's written from an Eastern point of view, so it helped me understand why this was being presented this way. And oftentimes when we look at the Bible from a Western point of view, we don't understand the concept because we're thinking with a Western mind instead of an Eastern mind. Well, in the Eastern mind, as this book explained, the culture was a different, and the perspective of using this not phrase was with a purpose and with a design, which is the way God writes the scriptures. Okay, He does know how our minds work, and that's the point of why it said, "I shall not want." So, and here I'll explain this to you. So by human nature, we always want to define things when we hear them. That's the Western mind, the Western culture. We want to define things and how they work. We set boundaries and we set borders. If somebody says something is big, then we might say, yeah, it's as big as a house. It's as big as a 747 airplane. It's as big as a mountain. It's as big as the sky. That gives us reference points. Okay, we put definitions on it. It gives us that perspective. If we are given a concept in our mind immediately wants to seek definitions and set boundaries to be able to explain it or interpret it so we can think about it in those terms. If you look at Psalm 23, it could have said, "The Lord is my shepherd, and he shall give me all I need." Right? Could have said that. Relatively speaking, it would mean basically the same thing, at least to the Western mind. Instead of "I shall not want," he shall give me all I need. Isn't that pretty much the same thing? The only problem is, or he could have said, "The Lord is my shepherd, he will give to me abundantly," or "give me plenty." The only thing is, my need and my plenty and my abundance is defined by me, which means it's limited by me. It has a ceiling. Okay? If I'm going to define, and one person is going to define abundance differently than another person, and somebody else is going to define need or give me all I need. They're going to define need differently than another person. So by defining it with these different things, even if I get to define it myself, I'm still putting a limit on God and what he is able to do. When we look at these concepts, we've got to understand that we can't put ceilings or limits on God. If we do, then we are limiting him in what he's able to provide for us. I can't explain what my mind does with "I shall not want." How do I put a ceiling on that? How do I put a definition on that? I can't. I can't conceptualize that. So what does that mean? It means it's unlimited, without end. Sort of like the verse in Ephesians 3:20 and 21. "Now unto him that is able to do exceeding abundantly above all that we ask or think, according to the power that worketh in us. Unto him be glory in the church by Christ Jesus throughout all ages, world without end. Amen." Exceeding abundantly above. How do you even conceptualize that? Again, it's superlative on superlative on superlative. In 2 Corinthians 9:8, "And God is able to make all grace abound toward you, that ye always, having all sufficiency in all things, may abound to every good work." Again, superlative on top of superlative. So when you look at this concept of "I shall not want," it really gets into that endless, limitless, abounding perspective. And that's why it was used. Again, thinking from an Eastern philosophy, Eastern thought of mind, perspective, as the Bible was written in its original context, that's what God wanted to show. So when you look at this, you understand that "the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want" is a huge concept that God is continuing to build a perspective of boundless and endless abundance that he is able to provide. Now he goes on into verse 2 and explains a little more of the detail of that and what it looks like. Again, using the shepherd analogy with the sheep. So let's recap what we said. The Lord in verse 1 is Jehovah, which means God working with his people, God in relationship directly with his people. The word shepherd, as you remember, means to feed or to supply. So here, God is working with his people directly to feed and supply and to bless them. We always look at the redemptive name of Jehovah Jireh, means God sees and provides. Not only does God provide, but he provides abundantly. So that's where we start out with the first 9 words in verse 1 of Psalm 23. Verse 2, it says, he maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters. We've already seen in Psalm 23:1 that God has set a standard, which says that he will see and that he will supply, and that we will always never have need. I know that's too many negatives. That we really have no need of anything. That's the way it should be said. God is always there and will be there to abundantly supply to us. So it says that he will make us lie down in green pastures and lead us beside still waters. First of all, the word maketh means to cause to do something. And it causes him to do it by having something so wonderful and so magnificent that your desire is to lay down. Jeremiah 33 verse 12 says, thus the Lord of hosts, again, in this place, which is desolate without man or without beast, and in all the cities thereof, shall be a habitation of shepherds, causing their flocks to lie down. Even in the most desperate situations, God was going to provide shepherds to cause their flocks to lie down. Meaning that even in this place, no matter how desolate it might look, no matter how desolate it might be, that God was going to have shepherds there to provide for the habitation in such a manner that the flocks would willingly lie down. When you read Psalm 23 verse 2, it says, he maketh me to lie down in green pastures. And you have to think about the attitude of the nature of sheep. Sheep don't lie down. They want to roam around and graze all day long. Go get water, go get grass, move from this side, move to the other side. I watched some sheep one time in a field for a couple of hours, and they'll be spread out all over the field. And if one makes a sound over here, he makes a call over here, everybody runs to where that one is. Maybe he found new grass. Maybe he found new water or something to eat over there. But they're constantly moving. A little hyper, a little skittish, a little, anxious or whatever. They're moving all around. But here in this Jeremiah 33, God was going to have them shepherds that would help them to lie down, causing them to lie down, giving them a place to rest. God presents such a wonderful, perfect environment for us that he causes us to relax and lay down in peace and comfort. We have no need to search or to wander. Think about that concept. If I have to get up and worry about all my provisions, then I'm always going to be looking, always going to be pushing, always going to be under pressure. And that's kind of what the world is like right now. You don't know what's going to happen. Is the food going to run out of the supermarket? Everybody goes and buys 50,000 rolls of toilet paper because they're scared Walmart's going to run out of toilet paper. Okay. So instead of the sheep being crazy and running around, the shepherd takes care of them so that they can lie down in peace and in comfort. Running around just brings pressure and stress, searching for things on your own when God says he is going to provide. The shepherd is going to take care. The word maketh doesn't mean to force us. It means that he causes us to do something because the situation that is presented to us is so abundant and so good that we can rest and be peaceful. Today, people want to make God out to be, hard and direct and whatever. But with things like God is changing me, God is humbling me, God is transforming me, God is not through with me yet, God is making me his servant, God is doing everything for me and to me and with me. And I appreciate the desire for some kind of companionship like that, or relationship like that for God. But I don't believe that's the full truth. Like it said here, he's not making them lie down. He's not forcing the sheep to the ground. He's presenting a situation so abundant, so lush, so wonderful that they are making the decision themselves to lie down. So giving us the free choice to make our decisions, to look at the way he's taking care of us, and to want to be a part of that. Again, I look at this, the way that God has this design and the way that God has this set up, and I have to look at the bigger picture. Not so much what religion has to say or what denominations have to say, but what is the big picture of the scriptures that God is wanting to represent? What is he providing? What is he making available for us? God is not forcing us to lie down in green pastures. There's nothing this is not something that God does, pushing his own will on us. It says, my goodness will cause you to come to all of these things. We read in the Old Testament and in the New Testament about God's goodness that appeals to us and that wants us to be a part of everything that he has. But again, you have to understand, just because you read the word, he maketh me to lie down, it doesn't mean automatically that it's a forceful thing. You have to look at other places that it's used to see what God is really saying in here. Ezekiel 34:15, it says, I will feed my flock and I will cause them to lie down. And it's the same word that's used in Psalm 23. Okay, it's the concept of I will feed my flock and cause them to lie down, because obviously they're being taken care of. It's funny when it says lie down in green pastures. Okay, the sheep are eating grass, all right? But this grass, it says green, means tender grass. The green shoots of the grass, or this green pastures here, is referring to young, tender grass. God causes them to lie down in pastures of tender grass. Tender young grass has nutrition that sometimes is at its highest point when it's young. Grass by nature, when it is old and it matures, going in its natural cycle, it becomes old and it becomes brittle and it withers and dries and blows away. But in this presentation, when he's saying cause them to lie down in green pastures, the words green pastures means that young tender grass with all its nutrition, with all its perfectness, as God designed it to be. So again, painting a picture for us of God's giving to us exactly what we need in the situation. And then it says he leads us beside still waters. And again, the word leadeth means to gently lead or guide, not grabbing you by the reins and taking you down, but to bring you to gently lead and guide. And a number of different verses where that same phrase is used in the scriptures say gently lead, to guide, and to take care of. Or one says he will softly lead is the phrase that's used, and it's the same word, the Hebrew word that's used in Psalm 23. But to gently lead it by still waters, you see, again, sheep are very skittish. And I walked into a barn one time with 3 sheep in there. And as soon as I walked in, they were in this little corral. They ran to the opposite end of the little pen. And then as I walked further down and got closer to them, then they all 3 stuck their head in the corner and hid their faces from me. Now I was probably 5 feet from them, and they were all 3 stuck in this little corner with their faces, and I was quiet and peaceful. And so they calmed down because they figured if they couldn't see me, I must not be there. And so they're that nervous. And so when he says leads them beside still waters, what a beautiful phrase. And what it means is God is so caring and so concerned about the details of your life that he's leading you to a place like a shepherd would go. I read this one time on some research I was doing on the shepherds in the Old Testament. They would go on a stream and they would take rocks and they would build a little dam and they would let some water flow over into a side pond that they had built right there by the stream where the water was quiet. It wasn't rippling, it wasn't rushing, it wasn't stirring up. It was just a quiet little pond that they had built by making the rocks a certain way. Then the sheep would come in there and they would drink the still water. They would drink the still water because it was peaceful and calm. Because, again, they were such timid animals. So you look at what God is saying here, that he's going to such a degree to not only have you lie down in green pastures so you can eat all the grass you want and not have to move, not have to roam around and forage for yourself and find other stuff on your own. He's going to provide you with such abundance right there that it's going to be able to, you just lay down there and eat. And the grass, that young tender grass, and I guess it's going to refurbish itself. That's how fabulous he wants to take care of you. And he's going to lead you beside the still waters, give you peaceful waters to drink, peaceful waters to nourish you, and for you to be able to drink from. So let me get, here's a summation. Here's a summation of these first two verses as we get to the close of this. But what he says in this close is, God sets the standard as one who watches over me by being the Lord which sees and supplies. Therefore, I shall not want for anything. He takes care of my physical needs in such abundance that it causes me to lie down in pastures of tender green grass, never wanting, never running out of his supply. He gently leads me to a quiet resting place, providing for my mental and emotional needs for peace, serenity, and comfort, because he is the God of peace. So those are the first two verses of Psalm 23, showing us and giving us an opportunity to focus on some of the fullness and the richness and the tremendous love and care that God provides for us. So rather than wondering how many new cases of the flu have broken out or how many new, places have been shut down or what's going to happen to the economy or what's going to happen to us, let's keep our mind and heart on these promises of God, on God's ability to care for us, on God's ability to provide for us, on God's ability to sustain all that we need in life. Keeping our focus on that. I know how much the collective mind and heart of people who look to this positive situation and to this benefit that God can provide. I know how much that impacts the world. Just as fear impacts the world in a great way, this confidence and trust and love in God can impact the world in a great way. And I'd rather be a part of that. And I'd rather you be a part of that too, to have that peace and comfort, to be able to like the sheep, lie down at night and know that God is there, that God is there to provide, that God is there to give us his best, and that God is there to take care of these things for us. So that's what I have for this night.